just a bit of a context. Just a quick show of hands, who's been to one of our Strand days before here? Yeah, it's about 4 or 5 people, so this will be familiar to you. But as I said, the days are designed to spread the knowledge about the liberal arts, so please bear with me while I just repeat a little bit about what you've seen, but it won't take very long. So everyone in this room would be familiar already with our 5 content strands. Listed across the top there: Scripture and Jesus, Church and Community, God, Religion and Life, Prayer, Liturgy and Sacraments, and Morality and Justice. Through teaching those content strands, obviously we have our different units in each year group, the 5 units. So, A10, B10, C10, etc. Today we're focusing on E10. And a strategic decision was made in line with, not just religious education, but also education and research. So this eventually will connect with all subjects in our schools. A decision was made to look at incorporating a liberal arts approach, or connecting where relevant and possible some liberal arts teaching and learning strategies and resources in our day-to-day teaching in our classrooms. And I suppose at face value you might think that that's a little daunting, but it's not really. And today is one of those ways in which we're going to help you to connect with that concept, and also to gain some skills, get some resources together, and learn how you can do this where it's appropriate. And I use those words deliberately, where it's relevant and appropriate. We're not turning into a liberal arts system of schools. We're not turning into, philosophy 101 across the board. Not at all. Where it's relevant and appropriate, we're going to include these teaching and learning strategies, and we'll see why in a second. And this is just a big picture. So in terms of our system of schools from Sydney Catholic Schools, you'll see there that one of the outcomes listed in the Strategic Improvement Plan is the integration of the Catholic liberal arts and philosophy into years 5 to 10 of religious education. So it's integrating. I think that's a key word there. Okay? So it's not turning it into, but it's where appropriate. So if we look at our timeline then, you are here because of that very first point. Staff will be trained in the Catholic liberal arts. So we're offering professional development to help our teachers understand what that is and how to apply it. Because I know some people haven't always connected comfortably with studies in Catholic thought in stage 6, although it's the ground is changing there and people are building up their confidence. So this is just another way to help people understand and appreciate the Catholic liberal arts, as well as some philosophy, which goes hand in hand with the liberal arts. And Peter will talk about that a little bit later as well. And this second point is particularly relevant to us today because we're looking at our content strand. So we're looking at the E strand, the E10. And then the last part of our day, you'll be looking at your own teaching and learning programs, which really have typically come from the support documents when they've been created in your schools. As a system, we're going to update those support documents with some teaching and learning strategies for the Catholic liberal arts, but at the school level, you in your own schools, and part of your job after going back from today will be to help incorporate some of these teaching and learning strategies into your very own teaching and learning programs for E10. There's some of the impact and evidence on the right. We'll get to that in a minute. I don't want to read it to you this morning, but we want to encourage that deep thinking, deep learning, inquiry, questioning, allow students to explore, to learn, rather than sort of just be taught, to have that comfort to question. Not only to question the teacher, but to question each other and to learn through that questioning. So an example of that might be those Socratic circles that you might have come across in studies in Catholic thought. So how did we make sure that this happened in our teaching and learning programs? Well, as you know, we've got an RE curriculum and a syllabus that is endorsed by the Archbishop. At the moment, that's been determined that it is free from error, and it's been given a null obstat. Archbishop Fisher is currently in the process of signing off on his imprimatur, which is just his official approval that this curriculum has no more work to go. He's approved for it to be used in its current state. But he's just reading and learning a little bit more about a couple of things before it's given that final stamp. In order to allow the Catholic liberal arts to be included in that curriculum, we had to include another religious education priority. So you would have seen throughout your programs and those support documents things like the Eucharist and Eucharistic living, Marian perspectives, tradition, church tradition, scripture. So what we've done is added, in the process of this project, an extra religious education priority called the Catholic Liberal Arts. And it just says that, just like you would in Marian perspectives. Do you teach Marian perspectives in every single point in your programs? You don't, do you? Sometimes it connects, sometimes it doesn't. I'll come back to that where it's relevant and appropriate to do so. So the Catholic Liberal Arts will work in a similar fashion. If you have a teaching and learning strategy that you might unpack through a beautiful painting, great, there's your connection to the Catholic Liberal Arts. Or it might be a piece of classical music. You'll include that there as well. If it doesn't relate to the Catholic Liberal Arts, that's fine. It doesn't have to be every single lesson, every single thing you teach. And that's just to refresh your memories. I've already spoken about those. I've mentioned Marian perspectives, Eucharist and Eucharistic living, prayer, liturgy, liturgical year, church teaching, scripture, and you'll see there the liberal arts. This updated program is currently live and on RE Online, and you might have seen the new religious education curriculum website that was launched recently. That's also on that document as well, so it's already out there. I guess the why. I always like to know the why. Why are we doing this? To provide some sort of direction, clarity, context, purpose. Allowing our students to explore concepts in depth, promote deep learning in religious education. There's many ways we can achieve that. The Catholic liberal arts will be one. Exposing students to the Catholic liberal arts will help prepare them for senior secondary studies, particularly the Stage 6 subject studies in Catholic thought. And many of you that have taught studies in Catholic thought, there's always that hesitation, I suppose, in Year 11 with the different style, approach, the questioning, the Socratic sort of circles and that sort of methodology. So if the students have been exposed to this and are comfortable and can work in a classroom where there's a relationship with the teacher and each other, a relationship built on trust and that level of comfort, to ask, to answer, to inquire, we're already there. So this is part of that journey, part of that process. So the Catholic liberal arts fosters analytical, critical and creative thinking, oral and written communication skills, problem-solving skills, information literacy, ethical decision-making skills. Those scenarios that we've all given in class and to ask students to think about how they deal with something in connection with their faith. And that comfort, I suppose, to debate, to question and to understand, well, why. The ability to pose meaningful questions and also that self-confidence, self-understanding to really make that learning flourish in the classroom. So that's the why, I suppose, that we're here and what brings us here today. As I mentioned earlier, it's really going to be a mix of input, discussion, time for you to look at resources, implement resources, so the day will unfold either side of, say, morning tea and lunch. That will vary things up a bit. But first we will begin with some input from our facilitator today, Dr. Peter Mudge. So just by way of introduction for you, Dr. Peter Mudge has been teaching and writing in the fields of religious education, spiritual formation, and their links with the arts for over 42 years. Peter's a classroom teacher. His training commenced at De La Salle Brothers Schools, and his education was formalised at Macquarie University and also a range of other Sydney schools. He initiated adult religious education in the Rockhampton diocese. He's worked across 4 other dioceses in different capacities: Wollongong, Parramatta, Wilcannia, Forbes and Broken Bay, and now very happily working with Sydney. He's taught many online tertiary courses on religious education and spirituality in various institutions, including ACU. He's a prolific writer. He's written over 50 academic articles, co-authored and combined 15 books and book chapters, presented on many workshops and conferences, and delivered many keynote presentations. Peter's devoted most of his research, academic and teaching career to the twin areas of religion, education and spirituality. His academic studies, from bachelor's courses through to a master's and doctorate, have focused on spiritual formation, scripture and connected knowing. His recent publications include Living Spirituality, Series 1, 2 and 3, and just recently Living Religion, the 6th edition, as well as another book entitled Eternal Life Letters. So honestly, I'm very thrilled that, Peter, you can be with us today, and I'd like to welcome you to the lectern now. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone wide awake, ready for the session? This is when most of the input happens, I think, and instead of the twilight zone at the end of the day, but hopefully you'll be peaked by then as well and you can do some planning. So we've got 3 sessions. I know that you'll find them practical. We're doing an introduction to what is the Catholic Liberal Arts, so I'll call that CLA during the day, just to save time and get onto some of the artworks. We're talking about what is a classic, because that's one of the areas that you have to come into contact with and understand, and you have to discuss with your students. So I'm trying to make today, I'm assuming that, as Anthony said, that you've got your program already and you're working on your programs. This is to embed or integrate the arts into it. So you can use as much or little as you want. So you'll see references to the program, but I'm not going to go over the program again. I'm going to take it in the direction of how would you teach this through the various arts. So that'll include painting, architecture, Gregorian chant, and we've already done 2 days, as Anthony noted, but I'm trying to make it more complex as we go along. And I hope to do a scope and sequence of this at the end so you can see all the different artworks we've done for each strand. So that's where we're going. As for most of the strands, we've got 3 learning experiences. So the first presentation, because of all the stuff I've just mentioned, will be a bit longer. So I'll be looking at learning experience 1, 2 and 3. I'm not worried if we don't get through all of it. I just want to show it to you. As Anthony also said, all the resources are already there. Like, I've looked up the websites, I've looked up the background, I've looked up the artworks, and I'll refer to some resources for that in a minute. So have your notes ready and have that extra handout there too that I passed around. So we'll be going into learning experience 1. I just put that painting on the front there just to trigger your imagination that we can't do everything, but really the whole legacy of the arts, this Lascaux painting, like the Paleolithic arts. Has anyone worked in the arts themselves, like creative arts, or as an art teacher, or would like to be an art teacher? Right, so there's a few. And the fact that this is our heritage, like someone said last time, I think in secret, I don't think it was a question they asked, like, do we have to do this? Like, this is the heritage of our students, like Catholic liberal arts. And in fact, you could go right back to Socrates and Plato. You could go back to the earliest cave art. It didn't begin at the Renaissance. Like, this is their heritage. And as some of you said to me before we started this morning, not just primary and secondary, this is how children and students learn. This is what they remember. They remember the visual image probably more than some of the notes that you will pass out. So the big shift that don't worry if I mention this a couple of times because it's really important. We start by looking at the image. So there's a very heavy emphasis on visual literacy. So not the commentary, not your dissertation on the work of Caravaggio or whatever, but the image. and start with what the students can see in the image. That's my first recommendation. So do the flipped classroom or other methods that you use, get them to look at it. Don't do research, just write a reflection on it, look at the colours, look at the symbols, and we'll be doing that today. So as much as possible, I'll be asking you to do that so you can do it with the students. So that whole heritage is there, but we have to choose certain focuses. So there's a whole lot of art that I will build into future presentations. I'm trying to build from, as you would with students, what you know to what you don't know. So it's that stretching thing of education. I'll go to some words about that later. So I'm starting with a lot of the Western examples, but later on we'll go into Asian art, African art. A lot of the art that you probably haven't seen is medieval manuscripts and illumination. Some of the best art and some of the funniest art about religious topics is in the manuscript. So I'll show you a little bit during this one, but I've been reading up and collecting some of the delectable bits, so I'll show that to you later. Okay, so we're looking at theory plus praxis, which is excellent for social justice, you know, see, judge and act, but it's for every different strand that you're working on. They're the topics, as I said, that we're looking at. When we come to the classic, we're very much learning in discussion with the teachers that have been here before you for the first two strands. And they've raised some of these questions, so we've gone into them. So we're sort of knocking the rough edges off it as we go along. And in fact, there's a model that I'm using today that the others haven't looked at, and there's some slides that they haven't seen, so I hope you feel privileged when you're going through it. If you've got a copy of the PowerPoint, I've given the latest one to Anthony, so I'll put that up, but I'll tell you when it's a new slide. So even the classic, one of the questions that was raised was, are there different types of classics? Are there classic texts that we should look at? And why is that a classic compared to other texts or other artworks, other music? So there could be ancient, medieval, Renaissance and modern classics, and there could be classics within classics. So Lord of the Rings is a good example where the ancient legends are inside the Lord of the Rings. There's legends about trees, there's legends about elves and Anglo-Saxon and so on. Everyone will keep making Jesus movies and Mary movies based on the gospel, so they might not be as successful as some of the others, but they're still classics within classics. So this is good to discuss with your students. As I said, the pedagogical focus is visual literacy. I'll be suggesting some speech bubbles. Oh, I come in. So if you've, I'm not teaching you to suck eggs, so if you've done that before, that's okay, but if it's new, but as Anthony said, anything like Socratic circles or Socratic thinking, build that in as you go along. If you've got other specialisations that you feel comfortable with, such as maths and science, we'll be looking at some of those today, build those into what you're doing. This is my website. One thing I'll say about technology, you're free to look up any of the websites. If you think you've got a handle on something, look it up. That talks about the books. The books are up the front. And yes, I'll do a short sales pitch. I have them to sell if you like them. The great thing about them, I didn't write them. I didn't know about the Catholic liberal arts when I wrote them. I started them about 3 years ago. But I put artworks all through them that are relevant for primary and secondary students. So they've got the artworks and they've got the caption and sort of reflection ideas on how you would use the artwork. So it's right through them. So Living Spirituality 1, 2 and 3. Eternal life is great for death and grieving and suffering. I think that's a really important topic we don't deal with nearly enough. And we're preparing students for going into that world, aren't we? Like, you know, I think Socrates defined philosophy as thinking and reflecting on the fact that you're going to die. So he began with the end in mind very much. So that's there. Living Spirituality number 2, I'll refer to chapter 2 in that on prophetic justice, prophetic imagination and social justice. So that's very relevant to the topic today. They come as e-books and they come as hard copies. So there's a special price of $30 today if you want to get one of those or send them to you or talk to your REC. So there's lots of free articles on that site as well for teachers about Sabbath and all types of things. Okay, let's get on to it. References for what I'll call the CLA, the Catholic Liberal Arts. If you go to your handouts, I'll do some of these sheets each time, but the first one in the handouts, we've actually been more organised this time. We've numbered them because they've been a bit random in the past, like, you know, sort of not being sure what what teachers will actually need on the day apart from the basic stuff. So some of that will relate to the presentation on the day. I've just had a pinched nerve operation, so my wife helped me write this up and type it. So anyway, all good. If you ever had pinched nerve and shooting pain down the arm, you don't want it. So you can't even type. It's quite bad. Anyway, so all good now. Means I can type up the next 2 presentations with 3 PowerPoints each, doesn't it? So I'm right. Okay, so some of these articles we'll look at today. I put an asterisk beside the more important ones. You'll see the book there, The Liberal Arts for the Christian Life, on the front page. Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you're in the science area, you know about him. We've got a letter from him that links up with social justice. But, you know, equally you could take something from Brian Cox and all these other people as well. One of the great references is the Word on Fire Bible on the front page there with the black cover. And that has got artworks and commentaries all through it. The word you'll need to know here, we'll come to it in the presentation, is via pilpritudinus. That's Latin for the way of beauty. Via pilpritudinus. Pilpritudinus. Doesn't matter. You'll see it on that. But the via pilpritudinus is something that Pope John Paul II spoke about, Benedict. So the 3 ways that to really test out your Catholic liberal arts are what are called the 3 transcendentals, and that's truth, beauty and goodness. So if you've got that in the curriculum, that's what they're called, and they are the 3 pathways that lead you into the divine, that lead you towards God and lead you towards prayer and everything. So if you're teaching and relating your teaching to truth, beauty and goodness, you're probably on the right path. So just keep that in mind. So there's lots of references there. There's references to mine there. Quadrivial, remember that word, which means 4 rivers. We'll come up with that again. There's lots of books on painting. The Sister Wendy paintings are quite good. So once again, talk to your RECs. If you're not an REC, talk to your librarian. I put the best ones that I've found most useful. You'll see lots of Sister Wendy's listed on page 3. There's lots of ones on the liturgical season, so you can build those into Lent and Easter. A very interesting artist on page 4, the second one there is Hieronymus Bosch. If you don't know the Dutch artist, he's really quite wacky. I think the 9s and 10s would like them. In fact, I think primary school and everyone else would like them as well. But he's sort of morphing humans with animals and doing funny things, and he's got, but he also does scenes of the Final Judgment that are quite brutal. So I think sometimes students like to look at things like that. So Hieronymus Bosch. I'll be using aphorisms, which means fragments of text, so that is in the next section, because I think sometimes you can give them an image or give them an illumination, or you can give them a fragment or an aphorism, which means a little pithy saying, and that will turn on the lights for kids instead of reading 5 pages of something. So I think that's important. A few Latin sayings. Down the bottom, mentioned this to some of you before we start, Seventh Art Productions. If you want downloadable files, or if you want DVDs on artists, I think it goes from Giotto through to the modern artists, through to Whistler. I don't think there's one on Picasso, but he covers about 35 artists. They're about 30 or 40 minutes each. They are really good resources. And there's also a series on classical music. So we're not just sacred music, but I think, as Anthony said, sometimes classical music like, you know, Mozart's Concerto for Flute and Piano is something that can go with some of the things that we're showing the students. So what I'd also suggest is don't show them, like when you're starting off, show them one at a time. It might be a painting, but try and combine the arts as you're going along. So combine the music, put the music and the images together and the sculpture, and make it an interactive one. I know it's a bit more work, but it also saves time if you can do it. So I'll show you an example of that as we go along. Article number 2 there, I'm just referring to a bit, the article by Aquila, Value of the Catholic Liberal Arts Education. This is for, I mean, it might be for advanced students, but this is basically for you to read. As it was said before, like we're on about two things, and this was listed in your curriculum statements earlier. You're on about deep learning, what I would call deep learning. So the idea is to go deep into an artwork instead of going across. In other words, don't go through the gravel on the ground, go deep about 2 metres. Like pick something that's significant. And that's why I've adopted this model today of the planet and the moons. I've given you the planet, which is the main thing to look at in a learning experience. And I've suggested other moons you might look at as well. So we'll get to that later. But this idea of everything is connected, like all knowledge is connected. Philosophy, theology is the queen of sciences. Philosophy is the handmaid of theology. And we've got this great tradition that we can get across, and a lot of it is visual. But go deep and make it connected. In the second last paragraph, on the 3rd page there, in that paragraph, what is needed to educate the new generation, you'll see about 3 sentences down, technical know-how must build on a broad humanising liberal arts education. Like technology is not enough, science is not enough, they're both great, but all the rest of the liberal arts is needed for a broad education and for lateral and complex thinking and critical thinking. And that is really important. Finally, the other one I mentioned there is, I brought it forward a bit, handout number 9, because I found it later. I just saw this in Cath News, you know, it's one of those little stories on the side there. And this is someone who was 43 years old and knew nothing about the Catholic liberal arts and started finding out about it, like going to the churches, looking at the sculptures. I think this would be great for the students to read. I think most Year 10s could cope with that. And I've highlighted some things that are going to be some themes through the day. So I'm sort of, this is called John Medina, if you've read John Medina in his book Brain Rules, I don't know how many people have read that. He calls this a hook, which means these are word hooks that we'll go into for the rest of the day. So you can have a backwards hook into a previous lesson. That means refer to something you've already taught. You can have a forward hook, and you can say, you know, I'll show you this image of Hildegard, and the forward hook is we're going to talk about her in the next 3 lessons or something. So these words that are highlighted in yellow, I would call hooks. So you can see it's got truth, beauty, and goodness. I didn't ask this person to write it. It was just there. But if you get a good idea and you see it somewhere, you start to see it everywhere. That's my experience. So you'll see that she looked at Renaissance art. She looked at Michelangelo. She started studying scripture. She'd never been to the churches. One of the other things too is don't go into an empty church. Like, to understand an artwork, try and go during the liturgy or during the sacraments or during the incensing if you're going to one of the Spanish churches or another one. And then all those things are significant. You can see that the liberal arts actually made her life more meaningful and more purposeful. And then she also started to study art, that says in a follow-up. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go to the end of this section. We'll have some time for questions unless someone's incredibly lost. It's interesting on that page too, as I said, the Catholic liberal arts, the CLA, is a living encounter. So it's not just viewing a museum or dead things. So you remember Pope John the 23rd said when he initiated the Vatican Council, we're not keeping a dead museum here. We're trying to develop a flourishing garden of life, or words to that effect. So it's not just dead artefacts, like these are living things and they came from living contexts. Right, a little image. I'm just trying to do what I talk about. I'm starting with the image. So I'm asking you to dig deeper. This is the import of this one. So, sorry about the writing on this. We've talked about hooks and we've talked about visual literacy. Some of my students call this my mini sermons, and some of them count them, and then they put up numbers of mini sermons at the back of the class. I'm just not putting up with that. No, they're very rude. So I tend to have little things, a little aside. So if I've done a mini sermon on one of these, I'm just going to go past it. So visual literacy, important. We'll talk about theology, pedagogy and philosophy, but really the way that you use the artwork is your pedagogy, like it's visual literacy. The way that you are student-centred and get the students to look at the artwork is part of your pedagogy, and also is using theology. A bit of advice, dig deeper into one or a few fertile multivalent, means multi-level, examples, rather than gloss over multiple ones. There was an interesting interview with Geraldine Doogue with David D. Cavallo from ACARA, and he said we need to declutter the curriculum. Past programs went a mile wide and an inch deep. So this is from the National Curriculum Coordinator. Now we need to change course and go deeper rather than wider, focus on depth. A few artworks, not 20. Like, this is not the first education report where this has been mentioned. It's been mentioned right back in education recommendations. So you have permission, and say this to your coordinators and your executive and other people, or if it's you, and say, no, we can't cover all those bullet points. We need to go deeper. Because if you get a good artwork, you will cover everything that's important instead of looking at 10 or 15 artworks. Your focus is contemplation and the cultivation of wisdom and praxis. So there should be a certain amount of wisdom emerging from looking at these artworks. Following Francis, we emphasise the pedagogy of accompaniment. So I'm putting a few pedagogy words here, and that means walking with the students. And sometimes you'll see these pedagogical approaches. I saw a field education documentary where they were letting the students go ahead into the forest to learn about it, and the teacher was following behind. So the teacher was checking out the scene, but they went through and discovered it and then came back and talked to the teacher about what they found. So this is the sort of things. A couple of other passing remarks. I'm not going to read all these out. When you've got an artwork, you don't have to be an expert at that. I want you to experience a sense of relief. Just leave the anxiety aside. You're learning in a community of learners with the students, so just make that clear with them. You know a few things, you don't know everything. My wife's teaching at a high school at Pennant Hills and says, I've got to know everything about this topic in case the students ask questions. No, you don't. Right, you just know a few important things to say, you can look that up. Right? So I've just started you off. So when you look at an artwork, it's not saying, I'm the best, you're going to like me. The artwork is saying, say if it's Rembrandt's Prodigal Son, come over, I want you to have a look at this, I want you to show something. Like, I've got a different perspective, whether you like it or not, or whether you like the colours, or whether you like abstract art or modern art or whatever, I want to show you something. So you've got to be very objective about the way you look at it. It's the same with music. I would suggest when you're looking at music that you try to relate the music, not to whether they like the piece, but how is it evoking memories and feelings and ideas. And if it's not your particular feeling at the time, or say if it's a feeling of dread or a feeling of grief, as they say with the Psalms, when you pray the Psalms, if you pray a psalm that doesn't relate to you, you're praying for someone else. That's what our scripture teachers used to say. Like, if you read a psalm in the office of readings, or if it comes up in the mass or whatever, and you say, that's not how I'm feeling at the moment, you're praying for someone else who is feeling that way. So you're praying for the community of faith. I think that's really important. The teacher's role, you don't have to be an expert. There's an excellent, you can look at this if you want, Erica McWilliam, if you haven't seen it. Teaching for creativity. We go from sage on the stage, to guide on the side, to meddler in the middle. That's what her article's about. I tend to think we do all three. Like, sometimes we're the sage, sometimes we're the guide, and sometimes we're the meddler. So, but Jesus was all three, and he was a real meddler. He made people uncomfortable. if you look at the dinner parties to which he was invited, he would never have been invited back because he embarrassed his host, he did embarrassing things, he let a woman wipe his feet, he questioned the host about their understanding of the law and so on. So, you do your preparation, but really your idea is to get the student to look at the artwork and to interrogate it and look at things that they mightn't have noticed. And the rest of the class should help you with that. Okay, the liberal arts. Oh, any questions so far? So I don't want to be standing on a mountain and then be 5 mountain ranges ahead of you. I want you to be with me. You've got to travel with me. So this is the community of learners, you see. We're going. Is it making sense so far? No, don't just nod because you want to get away early. If there is a question, yeah, sure.
I think one of the correct things, because we were doing it in the States of Capital, was to use...
Just a little bit louder, sorry.
Sorry,
no, speak that way, yeah.
to use the virtual tour of the Sistine Chapel.
Yes, yes.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, yeah.
Students love that.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. And when you're doing architecture, I think in the church unit, if I'm not mistaken, Anthony, the first one is on pilgrimage, and you can do a virtual tour of, say, Canterbury Cathedral. And what's great about cathedrals, the same as architecture, is all the other artworks are inside it. And there's another couple of great series on the Sistine Chapel where they've tried to unlock the code of why Michelangelo did these paintings and put them in a certain order. It's quite interesting. Someone did their doctoral work for 25 years just to try and solve it. Yeah, any other comments or questions? Nothing is too basic at this stage. Like, this is the first 20 minutes, isn't it? So, okay, you're right. We keep going. Right. So, what are the liberal arts? And once again, I'm not going to read all this out because you've got the notes there. There were 4 basic areas: the natural sciences, the social sciences, arts and humanities. So you could probably say our history, and I was sort of reading up, like, when did the Catholic liberal arts become popular and when did people try and get rid of it? Because people didn't like it. They said, no, it's all science and technology. We don't need the liberal arts. But you do for a balanced education. So I'd say about 3 generations ago, there was a big battle in America and Europe to get rid of the liberal arts. It was just seen as, and you'll notice even in schools today, if you need to tighten up your programs, people will say, let's get rid of art, let's get rid of poetry, let's get rid of drama, let's get rid of excursions. You know, what? That's the question. What's the first thing to go? That's seen as unimportant. But this is important in terms of how students interact them and what they remember. So the life sciences were those. So you might find, for example, neuroscience comes into some of your lessons, the way the brain processes. So there's lots of easy books on that, John Medina. There's even one called The Rabbi's Brain, so there's a whole lot of Jewish neuroscience out there as well. Physical sciences. I mean, the fact that I mentioned it was connected, knowing you can't separate these areas. So the great prayer of St. Francis was he used to come outside the cave at Mount Alverna and other places, and his prayer at night was looking at the cosmos, looking up at the stars, and you could imagine in some of these places the stars would have been brilliant. And his prayer was just 2 lines: who are you, with a capital Y, and who am I? So in other words, he didn't know the area. That's a prayer based on astronomy, or the galaxies, or the cosmos. So his prayer to get his spiritual life in order was, who are you, like the absolute bigness and expansion of God, and who am I? Who am I compared to you? I'm important. I'm a grain of sand, but who am I compared to you? And that's how he got his spirituality in perspective, because God was always greater. Logic is also part of the CLA. Humanities, history, social sciences. See, it even includes linguistics, so you'll be looking at the dictionary meaning of words, for example, that will come into it. And then more humanities were added to it. So it was a bit of a hodgepodge in the beginning, and then they finally got something called quadrivium. Remember I had that word at the beginning, the quadrivial approach to spirituality, 4 rivers. So these are the 4 rivers of learning, quadrivial. Astronomy, maths, geometry and music. And really there was no separation, like music has got overlaps with geometry. If you look at icons have got overlaps with mathematics. They plan them mathematically. There's certain patterns that they look at that they can't change. And then they added the quadrivium, the 4, to the 3, which was rhetoric, grammar and dialectic. And I'll talk a bit later about what this means today, and you think, oh, it's just old stuff, like, you know, well, there's a sign, there's a website called Dead Male Theologians. You know, someone's making fun of the fact we don't need this stuff anymore, but there's real wisdom in this. And I was saying to someone, the people who looked at the cathedrals and the sculptures, like they looked at painting, they looked at stone, they looked at stained glass, that's how they learnt their faith. They could actually read it and they knew the stories better than us, but they were illiterate and probably innumerate. So, like, who's the advanced civilization? So we've got to recover some of that. We've got other things that have put us ahead. When you say liberal, a liberal means essential for a free and expansive and critical thinking person. So the word liberalis means worthy of a free person. These are all on the notes at the back, by the way, so just, but you might, hope you're not writing to keep awake, are you? No? No? No, you all look pretty good. So there's 2 Greek words here that are important. I won't be talking about many of them, but eudaimonia is on there, and that means flourishing to your full potential. That's a Greek word. So education, you'll see in your mission statements for schools, you want the students to reach their full potential. So this is flourishing to your full potential in Christ or in God, we would say for the Catholic liberal arts. But if you're flourishing to your full potential, that's a good start. Epektasis means stretching or straining towards God. Has anyone seen Rublev's Trinity at all? You know, the 3 angels, it's Anton Rublev, it's an icon. Got to get our literacy up here, come on. So look it up if you want. So Anton Rublev, the Trinity or the Holy Trinity. They are leaning towards each other. If you look at the painting, the Father, Son and Holy Spirit, they're touching, their wings are touching, so they're connected, and they're stretching towards each other. So this comes from, I think I've got it in the latest slide, so don't worry if you don't get it. Philippians 3:13, Paul says, I'm running the race and I'm straining or stretching towards the finishing line. The Greek word is epektein emene, which means I am stretching. So he's stretching towards God, just as God is stretching towards him. And he's moving away from what was in the past. He's moving towards a new life of transformation. So these are important concepts. So the Catholic liberal arts is about eudaimonia, flourishing, and it's about epektasis, stretching. So it's becoming bigger, if you like. Education should make you bigger and should expand your thinking. It shouldn't be making you smaller. So if the students say, I just want to stay in my comfort zone and do this and, you know, look at this song or look at this video clip, that's fine. You've got to expand into other stuff, right? That's your role as a teacher. Like, show them stuff that they haven't seen. So it then changed in the Renaissance and other areas. So some of these books I've put on the book list there. So that's one. So how can we adapt some of these areas that we spoke about in the quadrivium and the trivium, the 4 plus the 3? So we would call these disciplines now, and we need to encourage our students to think and behave towards beneficial ends to realise their full potential. There's that word, eudaimonia. You could say stretch towards their full potential, epektasis, eudaimonia. Becoming learned in the use of grammar, logic and rhetoric. For example, students could study how to avoid being manipulated. I reckon this should be compulsory in some lesson somewhere. Being manipulated by crafty speeches of unsavoury leaders. That's what rhetoric was. I mean, just think of politics. So there's a site called Logical Fallacies, and there's about 30 of them. They seem to make sense, but when you look at them, they don't. For example, the exception proves the rule. Sometimes that is actually true, but or you can build up a straw person argument. It's called the logical fallacy. I've had a hurtful childhood and I've damaged my ear like Vincent van Gogh, therefore I'm an artist. So it just goes through these sort of funny examples, but you can see that they're logical fallacies, they're not true. And, like when kids say, well, everyone else is doing it, that's the lemming approach to morality. They're all going over the cliff together. That's a logical fallacy. So I think in order to develop critical thinking, that is where it comes in. The study of the rest of the liberal arts, whether art, philosophy, etc., is important. What have they inherited? What great literature, paintings and buildings? I think we forget sometimes that St Benedict, Bishop Robert Barron has this series called The Pivotal Players. You can subscribe to that on the website. You can get downloadable versions of that. But he's got a series of books as well. And he says that St Benedict is the most important pivotal player in Western civilization, because otherwise Western civilization, as the barbarians came in and destroyed Rome, would not have been preserved. Where were they preserved? In the monasteries, in the manuscripts, in the illuminations, in the libraries, in the artworks. So, okay, some of the Catholic liberal arts. I'm sorry, this one, it looks really good in terms of the colours that I've put in the PowerPoint. This one's a bit light, so don't judge me on that one. I put a lot of effort into colour selection, I just want you to know that. Okay, so don't forget that part of the liberal arts, I want to sort of expand your thinking here. In the Catechism it says that the covenant that was made with Abraham and went through Moses and went through Noah and so on, that was always linked with creation. Take care of creation, take care of the animals. Are we just going to be saved at the end of time? No, the animals are somehow made in the image of God. Yes, your dog or cat will be there in heaven somewhere. So the covenant and creation, taking care of creation, is very important. It's part of the covenant. So therefore, you could see the creatures as classic images of God. They can't speak. So, for example, St Bernard of Clairvaux said, forget about books, you'll learn more from a walk in the woods and looking at the trees. So, but the point is we need both of them. So it's not just, we tend to think, books, I've read that, right, I've got that knowledge, but we're actually spending less time, particularly our students, in creation. There's actually research on that. So these are some of the other ones you can look at. I've found the most compact ones are paintings, chants, illuminations, the ones you can go into because we're time poor in the classroom. The ones that are the quick examples, if you've got more time, that's great, but if you go into a play or an opera, I mean, it's more time intensive, because you've got to set the context for where you go in. This is in Act 2, and this is where so-and-so. Architecture is a bit better because you can look at the cathedral or parts of the cathedral, but these are all interconnected. You'll see the fragments, so that's fragments of classical writings. That could be Augustine, it could be Pope Francis, it could be politicians, as long as it's something relevant. So I suppose the two other things here is it relevant to the topic of Catholic social teaching? That's the first question. And where is the Catholic perspective? So I'll go over this again. I've got a little sort of tick sheet, which is the very last slide, and say keep all these things in mind when you're doing the programming, because you could actually design something and it's got no link with the Catholic tradition at all. So you've got to link up with the programming in some way. Music is an often neglected one. Scripture and spiritual classics, philosophy and theology. So I'll show you a saying later that, all these are the Catholic liberal arts. The Catholic perspective is that theology is the glue for all of them. It's the underlying framework. So if you think of theology, I should have that as the sort of glue running through all those, hexagons? Hexagons? Yes. Yeah. So it's like an underlying glue behind all those hexagons. So theology gives you a framework, and you can often see this when you talk about, doctors and nurses writing about spirituality or other people. They haven't got theology and spirituality. There's something that's not bringing it together. It allows them to go deeper into who is the human person. Okay, so once again, if you do everything, you end up doing nothing, is one of the adages of teaching. I think you'll agree. So try and drill deep. This chart is just saying you need a fairly comprehensive pedagogy. So you've got the Emmaus model, Luke 24, but you need that underlying pedagogy. So you've got a number of things operating at the same time. So the first one is basically, what is the information? It uses a whole lot of fancy words, but this is based on myself, Terry Lovett, and Jürgen Habermas, a couple of philosophers. So I've given you some questions there. They're actually based on Bloom's taxonomy. Historical hermeneutical way of knowing means how you're going to interpret the information. So in other words, the students are looking at the painting, which is really information in visual form. What does it mean? And remember Sir Ken Robinson, the educator? Did you ever hear Sir Ken Robinson? He's got YouTubes online. He died a little while ago. And he said the old way of education is there's one answer. I've got it in here. You've got to guess it. If not, you're on detention and it'll be in the test. We're not teaching that way. There's more than one interpretation. So sure, look at what the artist intended, look at what Shakespeare intended and so on, but you've got your personal interpretation as well. Some people have stood before Rothko. You can look up Rothko's paintings, which are like colour field paintings, and they're just wept in front of them. They're just three colours because it does something to them. It's not just the price. It's the emotional... I have to have a bit of a release valve now and then. But it's the actual emotional thing in terms of it could be, the death of someone. It could be joy. It could be melancholy or whatever. So that emotional response to a painting is really important as well. So we've got to interpret. Emancipatory critical, which means the student has to be free to have an opinion about the artwork. If you've studied education, maybe in your bachelor's or master's, you would have come across Paulo Freire, Emancipatory Education. What's his book called again? Paulo Freire, can you remember? See, Community of Learners, you've got to help me. Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So he talks about emancipatory, which means you will be guiding the student and you'll be saying, look, I think this is important about this painting, but they're free to make their own decision and disagree with you. We already know this probably from primary school all the way through. Right, so there's some questions there for emancipatory. The end of education and the end of civilization is praxis, which is perfect for social justice. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to respond? So you can respond, Thomas Broom and other educators say you can respond cognitively by thinking differently, you can respond affectively in the heart, or you can respond behaviourally by doing something. So there's different kinds of doing or praxis. And wisdom, what is the wisdom that's coming out of this unit for your own life, for society? So they'll make a bit more sense as we go along. So there's an article that will be on the website if you want to read more about that. This one, before we get to the painting, I've mentioned some of this before. Christianity and religious traditions. A friend of mine who's Islamic has asked me to go to a Sufi festival this Saturday. He actually does taxi driving, but he's into Sufi music, and he wants me to come and talk to a gathering of Sufis about the links between Christianity and Islamic Sufism, which is their mysticism. So it's in all the traditions. Like some of the Sufi poems mention Jesus or Christ. Like they're working across Hafiz and Rumi and some of the others. But my point is, there's not one answer, and that's why I mentioned that. It's paradox. there's always two sides to it. So, for example, I mentioned Francis. You know, who am I in the universe? I'm basically nothing. I'm like a grain of sand. I'm not really important in the scheme of things. There could be other life out there, we're not sure. And yet I'm made in the image and likeness of God. You see the two sides? They're both true. There's not one answer, there's a paradox. You know, Jesus is a scruffy rabbi from Galilee, but he's the Son of God. He's truly human and he's truly divine. Paradox. So you need to get that across, and there's a lot of stuff in the artwork as well. So I'll leave you to read some of that. Okay, any questions? Is it making sense so far before we go on to what is a classic? So we're doing a classic, and then what time do we have to break, Anthony? 2:30. Right, okay, we'll do a bit of that, a few of the paintings before it. So I'm just sort of laying the groundwork, you know, what are the Catholic liberal arts? What are some of the issues involved? Now, what is a classic? Because that determines what you choose to work with the students. How do I know it's a classic? There could be a modern classic. Or you might say this is destined to be a classic. But probably if it's only been around for 5 or 6 years, it's probably not a classic yet. Time is too short. Any questions about so far the liberal arts? And like, it's a really expansive area, isn't it? Like, it's basically the history of everything. But we're focusing on the Catholic perspective. So instead of picking some music that's remote, you might pick Verdi's Requiem that would be to do with mercy and death and forgiveness. Because the thing is, does it fit in with your the aims of your unit and the learning experiences? That's the question. I think it's called the essential questions at the beginning, isn't it? Does it fit in with the essential questions and the learning experiences, like the guiding things right on the front page there of the program? Okay. Going okay so far? You've got a sore back like me too, feel free to stand up. Stand at the back, whatever. Okay, this is one definition of a classic. It meant belonging to a certain class or division, judged over a period of time to be of the highest quality and outstanding of its kind. So there's lots of different definitions. So in a sense, this is like paradox too. Like, often you can go to a dictionary, you can get 5 or 6 definitions of a word, like which one, is it an amalgam of those? You know, which one is the one we're looking at? Okay, we've already said there's different classics in different eras. Choose a classic that is multivalent, that has different, and that means it can speak to different students. Are there classics within classics? What are the formative questions that are raised by this classic or this artwork? Another interesting area, if you get time, is how do we deal with classics in cancel culture? Who decides that they should be cancelled? So, for example, an example I gave, I had to leave out a few slides to a previous group, was out at Windsor, there's a square called Thompson Square. So he's a great hero in the local area because he rescued people from floods, but he was also involved in a massacre of Aboriginal people. Okay, so this is not just Australia, of course, this is America and all over the world. So is someone so bad that we take down that monument or we take down that statue? You've seen the pictures of people throwing them into rivers and all that different sort of thing. Or do we put the two sides of the story on the memorial to say this person did this, however, and we try and we're never going to get the full story. But I think that's an interesting one, like, what is a classic? Martin Luther was really anti-Semitic. The whole society at that time was anti-Semitic. It doesn't make it right. But you cancel him because he was anti-Semitic. St. Augustine had quite a few sexual issues, let's say, or attitudes towards sexuality. Do we wipe him out because, that wasn't appropriate? So there's some real questions coming up here. There's a lot of quotes you would know about women in the church tradition. Do we cancel that because there's or it uses exclusive language? So these are coming up all the time.
Peter, just on
Yeah.
that, I think sometimes, like what you're saying, we can use as, I guess, a teaching moment for forgiveness. And, you know, that's an opportunity, I think, to go a bit
Yeah.
deeper with the kids and talk about sin and our dualistic natures. And, you know, these are the...
Yeah, I think that's right.
And that's the guts of what we're trying to sort of, you know, illuminate anyway, aren't we?
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
the good and bad, you know, our story as human beings, the human condition.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, I mean, it's good that you raise that because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
teach, you know,
Yeah,
post-war
I
life.
think it is a teaching moment, yeah. And I think it's, what is the value of their artwork? So it could be, we can think of musicians, for example, who had questionable ethical lives but have produced great music. Can we separate that? We might be able to use them as personal role models, but we can get a lot out of their music. So, you know, it'd be one thing that's helpful to discuss that. If you've done a split debate in class, you get one side to take the affirmative, one side to take the negative about a certain proposition, and then you swap them over so they have to see the other side. Say, okay, now you be the negative, you be the affirmative. So you've got to argue against your first lot of arguments. So, which is sort of what the court system's about in a sense too. So you've got a handout there. What is the classic? That's handout number 3. That's the full text, which I won't be able to put up here. So Italo Calvino is a famous Italian novelist. If you want to do something during the holidays, read some of his short stories. He's got these stories called Mr. Palomar, where Mr. Palomar just looks at the waves or looks at the grass or looks at an insect and see what he notices. And we're sort of rushing around, Mr. Palomar sitting there and paying attention. You know, spirituality is about paying attention. You'll find it in the Gospels as well. So here are some criteria that Calvino suggests. Often a classic for you, you'll read many times. I think I put that one, I'm not sure if it's in your notes, but in the introduction to that Why Read the Classics, it says a classic is a work which retains a consciousness of its own modernity. So they're saying that a book has a consciousness. That's interesting. John O'Donoghue would say that rocks that have been belted by the ocean have got a type of consciousness that's been built in over millennia. Not the same as human consciousness. So that's an interesting one. So they retain a consciousness of its own modernity or relevance without ceasing to be aware of other classic works of the past. So there's another saying, we stand on the shoulders of giants. So they're drawing on other classics, they're drawing on other ideas, and they've put it into some sort of amalgam. Just finished with these slides before. Like, these are important questions, and the students might ask some of these. Why are the arts important? There's a very important document, John Paul II Letter to Artists. You can look that up, it's on the Vatican site, you can just Google it. So notice these same words are coming out here. The letter is written to all who are passionately dedicated to the search for new epiphanies of beauty, so that through their creative work as artists they may offer these as gifts to the world. So there's a couple of theologians like Rudolf Otto who say that when you encounter the divine or the transcendent or the sacred or the mystery, whatever word you want to use, you get a sense of awe and wonder mixed with terror. Both of them are there. So think of the burning bush, think of the covenant Sinai, think of being in the wilderness. Like sometimes even if you're standing at a viewing rail, you think, what if I was lost down there if you're in the Blue Mountains? Like there's a sense of, there was a serial killer here, I'd be gone. That's what I think anyway. But, you know, there's a sense of awe and wonder at the beauty of creation, but there could be a sense of terror at the same time that you're vulnerable. So the word vulnerability comes from vulnus, meaning wound. So you sense that there's a wound or a danger inside of you. So, and the side wound of Jesus as well is linked to that. The arts help us to link the good, the truthful, and the beautiful. So I've put in I told you I'd only mention 2 Greek words, so I won't mention that one. Pope Benedict, if we were to meet Christ, if if the revelation of God is truth, beauty, and goodness, that if Jesus says to Philip, whoever sees me sees the Father, the total beauty of God would be in Christ. That's logically what you have to come to. He is literally the most beautiful person who has ever walked the earth in the Christian tradition. So we talk about the beauty of Christ, the beauty of his teaching, the beauty of his sacrifice, his approach to suffering, the beauty of the Beatitudes, and so on. That the divine word is put on a face, so this is, whoever sees me sees the Father, is quite, like, you might just scoff at that, but what if it's true? So C.S. Lewis once said, this might be a good one for the students in the classroom, he said, either Jesus is a liar or a fool, or he is who he says he is. So you've got to work it out. And you could say, yeah, Freud thought he was a fool. And just all the things he said just couldn't be true. But if he is who he says he is, it's like dominoes. You say, well, if that's right, then that's right, and that's why the apostles did that, and that's why the teaching. And sure, we've abused some things over the ages, but the message is still there. Pope Benedict again, I want to speak with you about, there's that word, the via pulchritudinus, the way of beauty. And that's in the Word on Fire book that I spoke about before. It may have happened, this might be a good scenario, imagination for the students as well. It may have happened that you paused before a sculpture, a picture, a poem or piece of music that made you stop. That you found deeply moving, that gave you a sense of joy, a clear perception, that is, that what you beheld was not only matter, a painted canvas, a collection of letters or an accumulation of sounds, but something greater, something that speaks, that can touch the heart, communicate a message, uplift the mind. That's the encounter with the classic. So if it hasn't happened, why hasn't it happened? Maybe it will when you look at some of these works. I'm just going to talk about why do we need to study and appreciate the CLA. It's our rightful heritage, I mentioned that before. A lot of people, including you in the room, would not have an education without the Catholic liberal arts, or aspects of it, like the arts, literature, philosophy, theology, astronomy. You would not be educated. In Aquinas' time, they had to learn all the plants, the same with Hildegard, and they had to learn the zodiac. That was the sign, that was the matrix of being an educated person. And notice later on, that for those who had money, they did the grand tour of Greece and Rome, and they became educated by looking at Michelangelo and Leonardo and all the rest of them. So what does it mean to be educated? It cultivates freedom, we've gone through that before. It develops a sound combination of faith and reason. I'll leave you to read that. It's to make a life, not just a living. Like, what is life about? What is the richness of life? When you do your job, if your job isn't meaningful, say if it's a stacking job, social relations might be good. But what is the thing that really gives you life in your heart, in your soul? Other insights from other Catholic liberal arts. I think this is good. I mentioned this to the RE team. I think it's quite a good quote. The Apple co-founder and former CEO Steve Jobs reflected that it's in Apple's DNA that technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields us the results that make our hearts sing. That's what it's about. Like, what makes the heart sing? When life gets you down, you go back to the arts, you go back to literature, to music, to theology, to philosophy. You're looking for something higher, something that's got more meaning. Just one from Francis. It's interesting, the arts are the light and the darkness, just like in the prologue of John's Gospel. And there's a couple of others there. That was what I was talking about before. When did the liberal arts start disappearing? America started to organise education around the natural and social sciences. Nothing else was allowed. This is part of the Dantean approach too in the last ministry of saying these are worth more. These are worth more because they're practical. but these other ones you have to pay more money for. They're pretty worthless. Okay, a last couple. I think these are good metaphors. This is C.S. Lewis and Mary Midgley. This is a new slide. So if you want to get out the cameras and take a photo, you can. But Anthony will put up the latest version. C.S. Lewis uses a metaphor for the ongoing tradition. So this is theology, this is social justice, this is the arts. Humanity does not pass through phases as a train passes through stations. Being alive, in other words, not just a machine, being alive, it has the privilege of always moving, yet never leaving anything behind. So even though we can't see all the carriages, we get onto one carriage, we don't see the dining car, we don't see all the rest. And we're also adding, shifting and rebuilding carriages, but nothing is lost. Like even the difficult scripture passages, this is what Bishop Barron says, like even the ones that are full of violence, they might have relevance something later in another context. There could be a spiritual interpretation of that text, right? There's 4 different interpretations of scripture. You'll find those in the catechism. So if it hasn't got a literal meaning, it might have a spiritual application or an allegorical application. So I think that's good in terms of tradition. Like, we're only seeing part of the tradition. We're only seeing a couple of carriages. It's like those coal trains. You've seen how many carriages are in coal trains. I stood there for 20 minutes once in Rockhampton and the train was still going through. They're huge. Mary Midgley is a philosopher and scientist. She's worth reading. You don't have to buy books for this. You can read a lot of it online. I find this is useful for talking about the Catholic liberal arts. Science and theology represent different perspectives on our complex world, like walking around a mountain. So if you imagine seeing different parts of a mountain, the mountain's in the sun, that's all you see. You don't see the shade. You have to walk around to actually see it. It's like the faces of a diamond. It's like the faces of a moon. I think that stays in the same position, doesn't it? Because of the gravitational pull. We only see one face of the moon from here. But you've got to walk around the mountain. So the Buddhists say the mountain is there, the mountain disappears, and then you see the real mountain. So that means you've got to understand the whole thing of the mountain, the whole picture. The philosopher Mary Midgley invites us to think of using multiple maps to do justice to the complexity of science and theology. So one map isn't enough. And I think this is a good metaphor for students. Different maps provide different information about the same multiple reality. So a little comment from me. We need multiple maps. Think of the CLA disciplines of art, architecture, poetry. And that's what we're trying to do today. Look at different maps or different planets and different moons. So they're all saying something. And, I remember some primary school students, they were no good at literacy and numeracy. There's probably lots of secondary students like this. But they did philosophy with them, and then all these so-called dumb kids who were looking out the window, what a surprise, were great at philosophy. We were discussing stuff like what is the meaning of art, friendship, justice, fits in today. And I saw the mouths drop on the teachers. They couldn't believe what these kids were saying. So we've got to provide the opportunities, and this is part of liberal education. So there's the sources there. Okay. Any questions? Might be a good time for a break, actually. Do you think? Is it 35 minutes early? And then we'll go straight into the artworks, but I think we've laid the foundations there. Are there any questions? We've got a few minutes, so you might want 5 minutes more coffee drinking time or something like that. Any questions that come out of that? Or sorry.
Can you include also, like in studies of Catholic, we do field studies?
Yes. Yeah, I think if you can find a good excerpt from the film, or and sure, you might be dealing with, say, a particular theme or particular topic. Yeah, I think if you can, if it's something that you've got the time for, and it makes the impact. So after morning tea, we'll be talking about the planet, which is the main planet that we look at for learning experience 1, and there's other moons. So there's other moons you can choose from. So one of those could be film. You could cover 2 moons or 4 moons, but I think you'll see the possibilities. Yeah, film. It could be a scene from, I don't know, My Brilliant Career, or it could be a play. and you think, you can explain it quickly and then say, look at this C. Write on the reading, do some peel activities or something. So, okay, any other? Yes.
From a primary perspective,
Yes.
C.S. Lewis, I've always used the creation of Narnia and that with the children, or
Yeah.
the scene with Aslan, when Aslan is resurrecting or similar. How much background should you give the children on the actual author, composer, artist, before they actually engage in some sort of discussion, or do you give them the work straight away and then give them the background afterwards?
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? I just say as little as possible. Just say, this was written by so and so. It's about the battle between the forces of light and darkness, or the witch and Aslan. There are some other characters. These are the characters in the thing, and then just show it to them. I'd say.
Show it to them or get them to read it and compare the
I'll get to read it. Yes,
text and then an excerpt.
yeah. Just
Yeah.
what the minimum that you have to say, because then the emphasis is on the actual text or the actual visual image that you're showing them. Yeah.
I think sometimes we do too much on the free stuff
Yes.
than the
Yeah.
actual task and the thinking associated with it.
Yeah. I'll give you a good example of that. I did courses on poetry at Macquarie University in the late 70s, and there were the courses analysing poems word for word and phrase for phrase, and it just absolutely killed it. I can't remember anyone reading out a whole poem and delighting in the cadence and the sound, the rhythms, the rhymes. So I think it's just giving them, yes, a minimal commentary and then letting them interact with the text and make mistakes if they have to. That's part of the appeal thing, like hypothesis and guessing is okay. Like we've got to have an atmosphere where you can say something and you're not going to be ridiculed by anyone else. So have guesses about what the story like. When Aslan gets tied to the stone, that famous scene, what do you think that means? What is it about?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe give some other background after that. Yeah. Anyway, that's just a suggestion. So. Okay. Right, we have some morning tea and back at what time?
Back at 11, just a couple of announcements.
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone.
So just a reminder that, and thanks Peter, that's been a great introduction, and as I said, we're going to just lay the foundations in what we've just done, the what is the liberal arts and some of the technical aspects before we start applying it to our E stream after morning tea